Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the infant presentation families. I'm very happy to be able to introduce our guest speaker. As Dr. David Sensei said, we have another doctor, a dental doctor, Todd Tsuchiya from Minnesota. And he's been at the Institute of Buddhist Studies he's doing a career change. He's preparing to become a minister with the Buddhist Churches of America. And so he's just completed his first year, and he'll continue in this summer to go to Japan for his initial ordination. And so this is a special opportunity because he'll be leaving back from Minnesota in a few weeks. So I decided, well, even though our schedule is a little tight, we could take advantage of his being in the Bay Area to have him share some of his thoughts. Like, as I mentioned, he's originally from Minnesota. That's where he was born and raised. And he's been a very active leader of our Minnesota, they call it Twin Cities Sangha Center or gathering that they meet in Minnesota. I don't know how often, but maybe he could fill us in on that. So anyway, he's going to begin with a short message to the Dharma school children who are excused to go on to prepare for our luncheon today. And then, as mentioned, Reverend Keisuke will share a message in Japanese following. 今日のご講師はミネソタ出身、本当に珍しい方です。今まではhow do you say 歯医者 dentist 歯医者でした。でもこれからその開教師の道に入りまして、そして今 IBS で学んで、そして今月この夏に日本で得度を希望してますから、だからこの次来るとき、その土屋先生は開教師でいらっしゃると思います。だからそして土屋先生英語の話の後に圭介先生が日本語の講話もまたいただきます。それでは、土屋先生お願いします。
Good morning. Good morning. Well, thank you, Reverend Kobata, for your nice introduction. He was very kind. I'm not in my first year at IVS. I'm in just finishing my fourth year of my 3-year program. So, so he was very kind. And I actually have a 5th year of my 3-year program coming up. So I'm a little slow. Information takes a while to get to the Midwest. So anyway, so thank you very, very much for inviting me to speak at your service today. I know it's a very full day of very meaningful activities here. Just to be squeezed in between is quite an honor that you're here and willing to listen to me. I know the doors are not locked, so I know you're willing to be here. I'm particularly honored to be here as part of the Shotsuki to hear the names of family and friends of your temple, and remember and honor those who have made an impact on your lives. And for me personally, the month of May in our Sangha back in Minnesota is particularly meaningful. It would be my father and my sister's Shotsuki, and so I know I'm missing that particular service, so being able to be here is very nice for me. And I know Reverend Kobata mentioned my connection. David Matsumoto Sensei, president of IBS, is my brother-in-law. So when I refer to my sister, that was his first wife that I'm sure many of you have heard his story before. And I know you'll have an infant presentation ceremony today, which of course is a very joyful time and very exciting to see so much energy and new life. And of course, we can't forget Mother's Day, which I should have mentioned first. But so Reverend Kobata asked me to speak with the Dharma School first before you run off to help with the lunch today. And I know today we are also celebrating Gotane, or the birth of Shinran Shonin. And I know when we celebrate birthdays, it's really an opportunity to extend our gratitude to family and friends and to really life itself, right? We realize the joy of birth as it's a rare and wonderful gift. And we just recited the three treasures. I particularly enjoy that or appreciate that, as it says in there, hard is it to be born into human life. And so a birthday is really a celebration of another year of our life that comes from understanding that without all of you and without so many causes and conditions, none of us would be here today. So as you know, probably all know, Shinran is a founder of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, and if he was alive today, he would be 846 years old. So I know that sounds silly to think about it that way, but even though he lived such a long time ago and is no longer physically with us, Shinran's teachings, of course, remain with us. And it's like those who are honored today during the Shotsuki, their influence will always be an important part of our lives. The Gotane is a time to remember Shinran and to express our gratitude for his teachings. So I need to tell you a little bit more about how Shinran, maybe his teachings and the Nembutsu teachings have influenced me, but I have to put a little spin on it. It's through my cat's life. And the reason I say that is because I've moved here in February, so I've been gone for 4 months. And I have my wife and my son, and our 2 cats are back in Minnesota. And I miss them all, but I told my wife, unfortunately, that I said this. I miss our cats the most. And that didn't go over real well. But since I miss them, I guess I do want to tell you a little more about them and how Shinran teaches that Amida works through my cats to teach me. And so if I could begin maybe with a passage from Shinran's work. It's from the Notes on Essentials of Faith Alone. So if you'd please join me in Gasho as I read this particular passage. People who aspire for the Pure Land must not behave outwardly as though wise or good, nor should they act as though diligent. The reason is stated, for inwardly we are possessed of falsity, that which is empty and transitory. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. So one way to think about this is that Shinran is telling us, don't pretend to be something you aren't. Just be the real you, and understand that our inside self is really just fine, and Amida accepts us as we are. And my cats understand this very well because they teach me this every day. And first of all, I have to show you a picture. This is one of my cats. Hopefully you can see it. This is Mochi. Our other cat, I know he's not that white, but he's Mochi. And our other cat is named Bodhi. My wife named our cats. And Mochi is a Buddhist cat. And I know that, well, obviously you know that because he has his own Nenju, right? Nenju. But secondly, he's a Buddhist cat because he says the Nembutsu all the time. Now, if you hear him to you, it might sound like meows, but to me, he's saying the Nembutsu, he's saying Namo Amida Butsu all the time. And the reason he does this, I think, I know he hasn't said this to me, don't worry, I'm not that odd. But I think Shinran talks about this in his wasans, the hymns of the Pure Land Masters, where he says, for all people, men and women, and cats, I know he didn't say that, but I'm sure he meant cats, of high station and low, saying the name of Amida is such that whether one is walking, standing, sitting, or reclining is of no concern, and time, place, and conditions are not restricted. So for Shinran, the Nembutsu is spontaneous and without formal constraints, and I think that's what Mochi does. Mochi is saying the name out of gratitude that Amida is thinking of him too. And we're still working on him saying itadakimasu, but all those syllables are hard for a cat to say. One day we were sitting together watching the news, and he watches the news too, I know you're wondering. And then the person on the TV was giving a report on a recent study that said that dogs are much smarter than cats. And the reason for the basis of that particular study was that they said dogs have twice as many more neurons than cats. You know, neurons are the cells in the brain that communicate. So if they have more neurons, they say maybe dogs are smarter than cats. I don't know. But when I heard this story, Mochi was sitting on my lap. I thought, oh no, I wonder if he heard it. So I quickly covered his ears, but I was a little too slow. So I'm pretty sure he heard it. So what do you think he had to say? Well, all he did was he just kept doing cat things, like he was licking his fur, cleaning himself, and he nuzzled up to me, he was purring. He does all those things very well, and he's really good at them. So I don't think he was really bothered by that study. So you might think, well, that's silly. Cats can't understand the news, so why would he be bothered? Or you might be thinking, Reverend Kobata should have reconsidered his invitation to me to speak. But I think we can learn a lesson from Mochi. He's a cat. He knows how to be the best cat that he can be. At times, I think he's a bodhisattva, though, doing bodhisattva activity. He's teaching me to be more about myself. So why should I be worried what he thinks? And when they come up with a study about how smart dogs are, he doesn't try to be a dog. He doesn't try to be a human. He just does cat stuff. Being himself is the best he can, and I think he does a pretty good job at it. And he is just as he is. He's just as he should be, just as nature is, without ego. And sonomama is the Japanese word, just as you are, or just how nature brings it. Now, early in Shinran's life, he tried to transform himself, and he spent 20 years in his early life on Mount Hiei trying traditional Buddhist practices to become awakened. But it was only when he decided that he can't and he is not able, that he recognized himself as an ordinary foolish being, that a transformation occurred. And I think it's an important message that you don't have to be the best person in the world, but to recognize who you are and that it's okay. I think maybe if Mochi was around, he could have helped Shinran sort of cut to the chase on that one. So our parents try to be the best parents they can be. They don't try to be the best Reverend Kobata. That's Reverend Kobata's job. You should do the best you can do to be who you are, not someone else. So be like Mochi. So that's my new saying that they've come to realize that I use. When I start to think too much about myself, comparing myself to others, or when I think I'm better than someone else, or try to be something that I'm not, I think, be like Mochi. So, Dharma School kids, your takeaway message today, if you go home and somebody says, well, what did you learn in Dharma School today? Say, be like Mochi, all right? Got it. Shinran reminds us that Amida accepts us just as we are, and the vow does not discriminate and saves all sentient beings. So we don't have to be anything other than ourselves. And so if we are a cat, we don't have to be a dog. So I'm grateful to Shinran for his teachings and want to remember him on his birthday by expressing my gratitude in the method of my cat, Mochi. So please join me in Gasho. As we say the Nambutsu, but in the way of Mochi. Ready? Meow. 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 Namandabs, namandabs, namandabs. Thank you. I think you're dismissed. The Dharma School is dismissed to help in the kitchen. Well, thank you again for inviting me. I know a part of today's service that I do want to speak about is the celebration of Mother's Day, and I certainly want to wish all of you mothers a happy Mother's Day. And I think that is something that we all have in common, of course, that we all have a mother to thank for our lives. And since it's Mother's Day, I do want to start my talk with a reading from the Jodo Wasan, or the Hymns of the Pure Land. So please join me in Gasho. When sentient beings think on Amida just as a child thinks of its mother, they indeed see the Tathagata, one who is never distant, both in the present and in the future. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandabs, 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 namandabs. Now this hymn talks about thinking on Amida, which you'll find in the larger sutra, where it says, if persons think on me and say my name, spontaneously taking refuge in me, immediately they enter the stage of the definitely settled and will realize the supreme perfect enlightenment. Many of you probably recognize this as this is from the primal vow that Amida took to ensure birth in the Pure Land for all of us. Now, Shinran seems to have a deep regard for the depth of the relationship between a child and its mother. From birth, when a child's needs are traditionally taken care of biologically by its mother, a child instinctively thinks of its mother. It's a primal instinct that comes from an indescribable place deep within. Many of you know the story of Shinran, where he lost his mother at a very early age, and in fact at age 9 is when he entered the monastery. So just like one's relationship with Amida, one's relationship with your mother is similar. When you think on them, neither is far away no matter what. You can rely on them no matter what. Allowing yourself to be taken care of is what you will receive. Neither is a relationship that you need to seek. It is given to you. It is a relationship that is nurtured over time, a relationship of awakening and awareness. So I think based on this reading, I think Shinran wouldn't mind sharing his birthday with Mother's Day. And the reason I chose this passage is that before I moved to Berkeley back in February for this semester, our family held a third-year memorial service for my mother, who was 92 when she passed away in 2017. And of course, this being Mother's Day, I think of her, and I know you all think of your mothers with so much gratitude in that. So I want to share with you a little more about her and the influence that Shinran's teaching had in her life. You know, before she passed away, my mother had been declining with the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, but the progression was slow, fortunately. Now, she was a very devout Jodo Shinshu Buddhist, and sometimes she talked to me about the Nembutsu and what might happen to her after her death. Now, she lived through many difficult life experiences. Of course, she's from California. She was from California, and her family was in Gila River during the war. And she lost a daughter, as I explained to you. And she lost her daughter 39 years ago to cancer when my sister was 26. And that was a very difficult loss, as it would be really for any parent. My father passed away unexpectedly 21 years ago. And she always felt cheated that for some reason they were not able to say goodbye to each other. Although they lived life very fully, there was some level of difficulty that she had with that. And her belief was that someday she and her family would be reunited once again in the Pure Land. Now, I hung out with her most days, and as her Alzheimer's degrees progressed, so I was able to be with her quite a bit. And as her cognitive ability declined, she would ask me things like, where are my parents? Where are my siblings? Why aren't they visiting? And she thought they were still here somehow, and I was hoping that they would visit her soon. And I always wondered if that was her memory loss, or maybe if that was her Buddhist beliefs, and that she truly felt their presence somehow, or maybe a little bit of both. Now, when Jodo Shinshu Buddhists talk about what happens after death, you know, there can be many variations of what people think will occur. You know, where is the Pure Land? Is the Pure Land an actual place? Is something in our minds? Do I really go somewhere, or what is it that goes somewhere? And maybe it's all the above, or some of the above, or none of the above. But Amida's wisdom and compassion assures us that we were born in the Pure Land. And my mother didn't try to intellectualize it. She felt it in her heart. And that was most important to her. What that meant to my mother was being with her daughter, her husband, her parents, and her siblings once again. And the reassurance and calming effect that this belief had on her was very, very deep. So I want to tell you a story that how our lives, the interrelationship of things that affected me, and it gives a little insight and a little deeper into her, not only her gratitude to Amida, but her desire to share the teachings with others through just living authentically as herself. So my mother enjoyed arts and crafts. One thing she loved to do was to make origami and to share them with others. And she sometimes would make them out of dollar bills and give them to people, and they would make them very happy. And I would go to an office, a local office or retailer, and I would see this origami or dollar bill origami at their desk or behind the counter. And I'd say, where did you get that? And it was always my mother who got there somehow before me. And I'm a retired dentist, as Reverend Kobata mentioned. When I was still working, there was a patient of mine who came in and was very anxious and excited to tell me a story. And she's a mother of 3, but she had recently lost a very young son to cancer, so this mother was about my age. And this son who died of cancer, he was also a patient of mine, a very young boy. She told me about what she thought was a very random event that occurred to her and her family, but when I reflect on it, it was a very deeply karmic event that happened to her family a short time after her son's funeral. And she was at a local mall with her remaining children, and they stopped to rest for a while. Their family had been struggling with the sadness of their loss. She said a nice elderly woman came up to them, came up to her kids, and gave them origami cranes where you could, you pull on the tail and the wings flap, showed them how to do it. And they laughed and smiled, and it made their entire family happy. And she saw the name on the woman's cane, and it looked familiar to her. So she told me this story and said, "Does that sound familiar? Or did you know this woman?" And I said, "A couple sentences into your story, I knew that was my mother." She said it was really nice to see her family happy and to forget just a little bit for a little while. And she told her husband afterwards that when she gets older, she wants to learn how to make origami just to make people happy. And Amita's wisdom and compassion was very much a part of my mother's life. I know many of you made origami tsuru, or cranes that were taken to the border by Reverend Kobata, right? It is part of the tsuru for solidarity. And thanks to Yumi, I was able to make some cranes that were included in the group that Reverend Kobata took on his trip. Of course, I learned how to make the tsuru from my mother as a child, and for some reason I just always remembered how to do that, so I just sat down and started making cranes. When I was doing that, though, I thought about her each time I made a crane for this tremendous cause. And I think if she was alive, she would have made as many of those cranes as she could to support this effort on behalf of kids. That was very important to her. But then I realized through me that she was doing this. So when my mother passed away, I received many cards. Social media posts were out there and phone calls from people. Each of them had their own story about what I would call a trail of origami happiness that she left. And it was truly overwhelming. So when I saw all those dollar bills on social media, my Bombu self came out. I thought, that's my son's college education. But after thinking about it more, the compassion she conveyed was truly amazing. And there was a song written and recorded about her by a local notable artist called "Be Kind to All That Lived." And he felt that characterized her outlook on life. I think it's a song particularly pertinent today, and for the Tsuru for Solidarity cause that could also be maybe Amida Buddha's walk-up song, right? I miss both my parents, and I think about them often, as I know all of you do with your loved ones. So Shinran also says in the Jodo Wasan, when we say Namo Amida Butsu, the countless beings, the countless Buddhas throughout the 10 quarters, surrounding us 100-fold, 1,000-fold, rejoice in and protect us. I'm comforted in the knowledge that when I say Namo Amida Butsu, because of Amida Buddha's vow, I'm surrounded and embraced by my parents, and they continue to be teachers for me. So this time in Berkeley has also been meaningful, as both my parents lived in California before the war. And my father's family lived in Fowler, and my mother's family was in Paul Erie. And both after camp, they both resettled in Minnesota, which is where I was born. So while out here, I was able to visit their home temples, participate in services there, so it's been very meaningful to me. And I met people actually who still remember them from 80 years ago. So I'm grateful to Shinran, to his teachings, and on his birthday I'm grateful that my parents were able to hear his teachings, as they are giving me a greater depth of and breadth of awareness of Amida in my life. So I want to just share with you one last thing here. I'll pull out my wallet. I continue to carry one of my mother's dollar origami hearts that remind me of Amida's compassion in my life and remind me to listen deeply and hear Shinran's teaching with all of my heart. So once again, happy Mother's Day. Thank you for letting me share my gratitude for my mother on this Mother's Day, as I know you think of all your mothers with gratitude. So please join me in Gasho as I read from the Jodo Wasan once again. When sentient beings think on Amida, just as a child thinks of its mother, they indeed see the Tathagata, who is never distant, both in the present and in the future. Namo Amida Butsu. 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 Thank you very much.